Welcome back to Beats Learning, the podcast where we dive deep into the music industry, exploring the journeys, insights and stories of the people shaping it. I'm your host, Ben Davenport, and today we're joined by someone who truly embodies innovation and leadership in music services. Alex Branson has over 20 years of experience in the music industry and currently serves as Senior Vice President of Music Services at the Beatport Group. From connecting producers through Loop Cloud and Plugin Boutique to bridging the DJ and music services community with platforms like Beatport and BeatSource, Alex plays a pivotal role in shaping how music is created, distributed and enjoyed. Today we'll uncover Alex's journey from his early days in music to his vision for the future of the industry. We'll also explore the challenges and opportunities encountered along the way. So, whether you're an aspiring artist, a producer, or just someone curious about what happens behind the scenes in the music world, this episode is packed with insights you won't want to miss. Let's dive in. So, Alex, thank you very much for being the second guest on Beats Learning. Welcome. I'm happy to.
Wow.
Very good to have you.
Sort of silver medal of podcasts.
Well, if you want to call it a medal, we'll see how it goes, if there's an award or not. But look, I wouldn't normally be this complimentary straight off the bat, but looking over your CV, looking over your career, you've really been a driving force behind, the development of independent artist services. Where does that passion come from?
I guess it's fairly easy. I am a failed musician. It comes very deep. Yeah, I mean, look, my journey began all the way from school. I was very fortunate to have that type of upbringing where I could learn an instrument, and I learned how to, read and write music.
Amazing.
And that sort of, naturally went from more classical instruments into the guitar-based world and onwards, really. And so, yeah, look, I just spent my time in studios when I was a teenager and loved it. And I think I feel like I can relate to people in some of the tools and services that I've been working on.
Fair play. That's pretty cool. So, what was the instrument you played?
Classically trained trumpet player. So,
oh wow! Played
in orchestras and wind bands and even a marching band. There you go. Not many people know that.
Well, there you go. First for Beats Learning.
Yeah. And then later bass guitar in a sort of an indie rock band. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Obviously, I'll get into your history of your career, but obviously now being at Beatport, which is really focused on electronic music, that's quite a transition, orchestra, and how did that come about?
I can tell you exactly how that came about.
Yeah, please do.
So I was the third year to do a music industry management course, which was the first one in the UK. So I'm sort of one of the earliest sort of generations of people that were formally kind of educated in the music industry.
Wow.
And more luck than anything. There's no reflection on how good or bad I am. More just luck, being in the right place at the right time. And in many ways, it's something similar. So I was taught it's hard to get into the music industry. If somebody offers you a job, take it and work it out from there. They had this great sort of thing where they, during the interview process to get into the course, they said, who wants to be an A&R person? And of course, loads of people put their hands up. I actually didn't, because I didn't want to do that job. I knew I didn't want to do that job. And then they said, who wants to be a A&R person for a classical record label? And nobody put their hands up, And that was the lesson they were trying to teach you, which was, you guys at the moment know nothing, right? You want to get into the music industry. So, and then I, as I mentioned earlier, I spent a lot of time in studios, and I was very interested in things like MIDI and technology in general. And one of the students from the very first year had come back to do a lecture to the second year students, which I was at the time, on MIDI, and I was just fascinated. So I was on a Friday night, instead of going down the pub, helping him load his keyboards into the back of his car. And one of the lecturers came running around the corner on a Friday night and said, you want work experience? Saw me in the car park. You want work experience? Yeah. And I was like, yeah, I've been on at you for like a year. And he went, right, Monday you're at Sony. And I was like, and that was my sort of sliding doors moment, I suppose, of my life. And I didn't really know what that meant at the time. But it saw me sort of do this kind of work experience across a whole load of different labels. And I ended up at S2, which was a label I was a fan of because huge Jamiroquai fan.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, of course.
And so that was, I did Epic, I did Columbia, and I did the post. In fact, I started in the post room. There you go.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That is properly working your way from the bottom. I love it.
It really, and do you know what? It was, again, just complete sort of like happenstance because in that first week, I'd learned who was on what floor, where all the executives were. And then I was doing sort of running stuff for Epic backwards and forwards from there was a studio called Whitfield Street Studios, which a lot of the labels used. And so by the time I got to S2, and I had literally half a day there, I knew how the computer systems worked, I knew where everything was. And at the end, Elias came out, and who's one of the product guys, and he said, "You've been great." And I'm sitting there with Sam Winwood packing VHS cassettes into boxes, just to age me slightly there. And so he said, "You've been great. Can you come back?" And it was my last day. And I thought, this was it. This was my chance. Nothing's happened. And then he said that. And just as it happened, the HR team at Sony said, there isn't actually an S2 placement, but there's this dance label, Incredible. They need somebody for the summer. And that's honestly how it kind of it went for me. But prior to that, I had an interest in dance music. Sure, my sister, who's a couple of years older than me, she won't like me for saying that. Much younger than me, definitely. So, she was going to raves when she was younger, and she would get me into a few of the just local stuff. Of course. Just local stuff.
No one's going to tell, don't worry.
No, and I definitely, loved that whole culture. She had all the sort of flyers on her wall in the bedroom, that type of thing. So I mean, to me, again, it was music. It was the music industry. I was interested in all of it. It wasn't really specific to anything. But I started in dance music. That's really really
so
where
despite
my career...
your background and your what
Correct.
did I say the inspiration was it was all started from dance music.
Yeah, and I my first job I think was making an album for Gatecrasher.
Wow.
With Scott Bond, and at the time these compilations were huge,
absolutely.
And then worked with Sasha and John Digweed, and then I did this whole series with the Radio 1 DJs, so people like Giles Peterson.
Let's be
Joe
honest,
Wiley,
if you're not sold by that point, you never will be.
I couldn't believe my luck. I absolutely landed on my feet, and fortunately worked for my first boss in the music industry. Was a lady called Lynn Cosgrave, who was Carl Cox's manager. She owned Cosmic Management, which was John Digweed's management firm. She ran Bedrock Records with him. I mean, I just couldn't have landed in the better spot, and she really looked after me, and she was great.
Fair play, that's amazing. So look, fast forward a little bit, and obviously, what a phenomenal story there. Thank you so much. And let's be honest, the opportunities like that really don't come around. It just goes to show pure luck and opportunity, right? Yeah. But let's fast forward, and we'll come back onto your sort of evolving career, because I think you've had a phenomenal career. I saw over 20 years so far, and as I say, we'll get into a bit more detail about that right now, a little bit later. But what you're doing now, you're the SVP of Music Services at Beatport, which, from my understanding, is really taking the two core elements, which is producer group and a DJ group, and trying to sort of kind of bridge the gap. What does that mean to you? Like, what's your goal? What's your aim there?
Yeah, I've always been fascinated in the stuff that's hard. And stuff that's either hard or nobody else is interested in, because I see that as an opportunity for myself, right? Because all the kind of sexy, cool stuff, everybody wants to see those jobs.
Absolutely. So what you're saying is you went after the jobs you had little competition with.
So it is that, right? Because why not make it life as easy as possible? Mate, but also
supply and demand.
Correct. But I'm also a bit of a nerd. I love technology. I was at university teaching myself how to code. I wasn't doing that at university, but I was interested in that. And I think that I sort of just, again, partly by accident, found myself in this world of digital music. And digital music companies really were distribution companies on the sort of supply side. And they soon became the sort of the experts for the rest of the record industry. So the record companies would use their distribution company as kind of their sort of like outsourced digital experts. And it just sort of magpied a bunch of other elements of outside of distribution. What else can you do, whether it's marketing or royalty reporting, all of those things? And those are all the elements that are present in my current role. It's really just, I've just found myself one of the very first people working in digital music. I was just on that very early, again by pure luck. I was doing I was working at this record company, and I was licensing for compilation albums. I was doing licensing records into the label. I was doing synchronization, pitching, anything to do with sort of the, the rights exploitation element. And then these contracts started to appear. In fact, the very first one that I saw was from Beatport.
Amazing.
Because they're 20 years old this year. And that was when they launched. But of course, they'd started this process licensing long before that. And it was given to me. And I was like, this doesn't look like a normal compilation request, right? This is like, what do they want here?
Yeah.
And then just found myself in this world of getting involved with probably one of the first digital supply chain companies in the world. A company called RightsRouter, and it just honestly just went from there. Yeah.
So for the audience out there, obviously one of the big focuses, certainly from my understanding of your career now and what you're trying to do, and as I say, we'll get on to sort of kind of what you've done previously in this arena. What is digital distribution? There we go. Thrown you.
Look, I think it's an interesting one because in the old physical days, you would make a vinyl CD. And on the back of the cover, so you got the music contained within the medium, whether it's some bit of plastic, probably. And then on the back, you'd have the names of the tracks and perhaps the name of the record company and a C date, a P date, which we now call metadata. Yeah. But at the time, it was called label copy, and it was written on bits of paper, put in boxes, or maybe if you were lucky, put in a Word document. And if you were really lucky, somebody thought to put it in a spreadsheet. And of course, most record companies didn't. And during that early period of it, it was really digital distribution was really like this idea of digitizing all of the asset elements that the music is. Yeah. It's the audio, it's the artwork, and it's the metadata. And then it's sending it on. And again, in the early days before things like DDEX were around, which is the standards that the whole industry operates on, it was a translation tool because you had on the one side these technology companies that didn't know much about music, and on the other side you had music companies that didn't know much about technology. So digital distribution was just this sort of art of translating the two. And I mean, it was very much a copy of the physical model. Like instead of trucks, you had, we actually used to use hard drives, and we shipped them on, via sort of DHL or something like that, to the DSP. And of course, eventually broadband got fast enough so that we could actually send it over the wire. But I lived through all of that evolution. So digital distribution for me probably means something different to what it does for most people. Like these days, it's like kind of a utility. It's like sort of water. It's not that hard. The technology just evolved, and people have got used to it. When I started, it was an education thing. You had to explain to people what on earth any of it meant.
Absolutely.
They've just never done it before. So so it's really the art of helping record companies get their music to retail that's online, for want of a better description.
Which obviously leads back to Beatport very nicely. Obviously, this is one of the areas that you're trying to sort of kind of help and grow and everything like that. What are Beatport doing in this arena to try and help labels and independent artists?
I think dance music in particular is it's not that it's completely unique, but I think it's the sort of best example of that sort of very fractured cottage industry, self-starter, entrepreneur world. And it comes from often somebody finds dance music because they've heard it, they like it, they start to DJ. So they're right.
Look around,
I'm sitting in front of your decks, and then they think, you know what? I really like that track, and that track. I wonder if I can make a record that sort of magpies all those things together,
Absolutely,
right? So then they become a producer, right? So now this one individual is the DJ, so the performer. They're now the creator. And one of the things that they then think to do is, well, what do I do to commercially release these productions that I've made? And that can sort of take a couple of different forms. The first one normally is, I want to get signed to, put in this box any of the big labels you can think of, Defected, Touring, Monster Cat, Armada, or whatever it might be. And they sort of had that aspiration, right? And of course, that's hard, right? Of course. There's a lot of people making music and not too much space on the kind of release schedule for all of it. And so very naturally, either they do get a little success there and they put a few records out on other people's labels, but eventually they make so much that they think, you know what, I'm going to create my own brand, and maybe it's associated to a club night, or maybe it's just an artist, and then label brand, and then they start putting out records on their own quote unquote record label. But at this point, they're music fans turned creators, however it came about.
Yeah.
But now they're business people, and they don't mean to do that. Like they don't start making music because they think, oh, I'm going to be a record executive.
Yeah.
Like there's no, like 99.9 times out of 10, that's not the case. And so I think what happens with dance music is that there's a lot of great music that's created.
Yeah.
And sure, Beatport will often find it. But, and this is probably a good way of explaining it, forever, up until the last couple of years, Beatport would only accept music that came from an established record label.
Oh, wow, okay.
So literally a human being at the store would look at websites, Instagram accounts, look at the artist sign on the label, check their Instagram accounts, right? Sort of really like look to see, is this real? Is it credible?
Yeah.
And that was the kind of criteria, the gating system that we had to allow music onto the store. Over time, that became harder to do, and we then put a lot of trust in the distribution partners that were supplying the music to the store. And inevitably, there's a sort of probably a bit of a quality area there, but the store is also human curated. So actually, a lot of that music that isn't very good doesn't surface, right? So there's that sort of trade off. But inevitably, you just end up with all these record companies, and so. If I try and think back to the question you asked me, because I've gone off on a bit of a tangent, but I think that there's a lot of help that needs to go into professionalizing this creator segment that is now finding themselves as business people. And what we're trying to do is make it as efficient and as cost effective as possible, because without their good music on the store doesn't have any value to the DJ community it serves.
Absolutely.
Right. And so we then don't have a business. So really it's about just making sure that money doesn't leak out the sides. One of my big things, which is a whole subject probably in itself, is that it's one thing to send your records to a distribution company for them to send it onto a DSP like Beatport. It's a whole other thing to understand that just because you've made a track and a recording, that you are also a songwriter by the sheer nature of the fact that you made this recording. And if you are, then you should be registering those rights with the various collection societies, probably either getting signed to a publisher or starting your own publishing company, right? Which is what we actually encourage our record company clients to do on the Amp Suite side.
Oh, really?
Because I think that there's two different ways normally it works. Is a publisher will come along and say, look, we'll just do an admin. But if you do that, then the songs still appear under this other company's brand.
Absolutely,
right? But you will still retain the rights,
of course,
which is good. But you're still like slightly adjacent to the practice, rather than being sort of the full owner of it. Or you just sign your works away to a publisher, and look, both are very legit ways of doing it. I've changed it slightly because I believe in the idea that people should own their rights and control their own rights until such time as it doesn't make any sense. And so what we try and do is help the record companies establish their own body of works, all signed to their own publishing company, administered through our system. And what we are is connected directly to the Collection Society network, so there's no dilution of the money as it flows through. And what we end up with is, in our system for our clients, is typically they're both a record company and a publisher with us. But they have all of their individual contracts with their creators in the system. Because the system will send out the contract to sign the songwriter or the recording artist. And so our platform now contains that sort of ability to sort of, resolve rights ownership all the way back down to the original creator, their representative rights owner, either the record company or the publisher. And then actually what I've been doing is adding a kind of a licensing layer on top of that pyramid, where increasingly we're seeing demand for what I call dual rights licensing. Most people would know it more commonly as like sync licensing. Which I think is it's slightly, it doesn't really explain it properly, because it's not always a sync necessarily, it's just a dual rights license. Basically where you need both the song and the recording to be licensed for a particular use. And if you think about it sort of from this easy to think point of view, in Web3 world, you have virtual clubs, but it's still an online platform where music is played. The collection societies don't have their venue licensing yet in place with these virtual clubs. Because virtual clubs are very different from real clubs.
It's more like a streaming platform, really.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. But it requires both sides license, right?
Yeah, of course.
And so unless they go off and do all of those deals with the collection societies, which a lot of these early tech startups don't do, they just can't get off the ground. They can't get that proof of concept, get that critical mass of users. And so it all sort of stalls, or it drifts down that sort of pirate route, right? Which, again, doesn't really help anyone. No. So I'd rather, as Beatport, represent a kind of sandbox of repertoire, help my clients be early on these ideas and explore these new forms of exploitation for their music, and perhaps build some of their artists into, again, whether it's a virtual world or something in the real life. And another version of this is the sort of large increase in microsync licensing. So you've got YouTubers that use production music. They don't want to use commercial music because it's too expensive. So microsync platforms like Licked have appeared, where they will offer to a YouTuber or somebody on Instagram, any sort of, or TikTok or whatever it might be, the ability to actually get that license so that they pay the rights holder an agreed amount, but they get to keep all the advertising revenue. And so it's like, double-edged sword. You might be losing some of that kind of incremental income as a rights owner, but you were never going to get it because they were never going to use commercial music. So that's the sort of trade-off. It's like, okay, I'm better off to get that couple of grand or whatever it might be for the license, and sort of bank that cash and reinvest it into what you're doing.
Absolutely.
Rather than sort of this hopeful, well, maybe they'll use the music and get the advertising revenue through. Anyway, massive tangent. I will do that. You have to pull me
I love it. So taking into consideration what you just said, obviously you're making a very approachable and scalable model for both labels but artists on their own, right? These people that, we've got obviously things like AWOL and things like that, artists without a label, people that want to do it on their own. Now, whether that's because the music's not good enough to get signed, or whether it's they just decide to go the direct route on their own. How do you think sort of having that accessibility is changing the sort of the landscape?
Hugely.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, look, it's sort of a blessing and a curse.
Yeah, of course, absolutely.
It sort of exacerbates the thing I was sort of describing earlier, which is, it's one thing to make music and to these days put it out onto a DSP, but to be sort of professional and act professionally is another matter. And I don't think it's acceptable for the record industry to expect anybody to understand the complex, rights world. I think that's unlikely. And so, we always talk about education. We've got to get people to engage with the education for that to be a thing. So, we've sort of become reliant on these companies like TuneCore and DistroKid to sort of take on that responsibility. And their business model is that, right? Yeah, absolutely. And I think some of them, TuneCore, I can call out because I know Andrea, who's a CEO personally, and I think she does a fantastic job. And so, in fact, we as Beatport have recently been sort of pioneering this slightly different approach to how to treat what we call independent artist repertoire on our store, because our store is geared towards record labels. It always has been. It's one of the few stores where you can search by label, and that's a byproduct of
trust me, I've used it. I must have given you guys thousands of pounds over the years,
well,
so very aware.
You should keep doing that. Right? It's end of year bonus time for some of us, right?
I need more DJ gigs first, and then maybe I'll buy new music. But when it comes to that, so that's a whole different story.
Well, if any bookers are listening,
if anyone's out there, let me know. I'm right here. I've got the decks. I'm ready to shop.
He's literally right here. He's waiting for your call. Call us now. No, this is live.
From Alex Branson, SVP of Music Services, Beatport. I love that.
That's it. Yeah, book Ben.
So how do you see sort of Beatport evolving then? Obviously, we touched base on a second ago. You've obviously got the DJ group, you've got producer group, which through there you've got Loot Cloud, you've got Plugin Boutique, you've got Beatport, you've got Beat Source, and sort of many more brands sort of kind of falling under it. And obviously, I mentioned earlier, you're looking to sort of kind of, let's say, close the gap on them. How is Beatport further looking to evolve to work with these sort of scenarios? Obviously, we mentioned the understanding of what an independent artist is. Obviously, you've been focused on labels previously. What are you doing next to evolve with that demand?
Yeah, I've been full-time employed 3 years. I was a consultant a couple of times before that, so I've been in and around the business since it began.
To be discussed, mate. To be
discussed.
discussed.
Okay. That's fair enough. And Rob McDaniels, who's the CEO, I forget exactly when he started, something like 5-6 years ago. And what he inherited was essentially a download store. And I assure you, at that time, nobody was talking about download stores. But of course, it's a sort of nuance of DJing culture that they want the offline file because they don't trust streaming yet. And quite rightly so. Not very many venues can cope with it. But we've made sort of great strides with Pioneer, our partners, with our streaming product, which is really a kind of an integrated performance streaming service, I suppose. It's just not the same as and with respect to Spotify and Apple Music, services I use, it just isn't the same thing at all. It's designed for performance,
absolutely,
and experimentation and crate digging, and
it's good fun part of the research. Honestly, I love it.
It's a lot of fun. I think, look, that's why people DJ, surely.
Well, I don't know so much these days, but that's once again, that's a whole nother conversation.
Maybe, but we obviously have always sort of struggled with the store from the point of view of like, how do you like, because when you're thinking about the track for the set, you've got to think about the BPM and the key that it's in, as much as the genre or the niche subgenre of the genre that it might be in. And so the best way of doing that is obviously to try the track in a mix.
Absolutely.
Really hard to do when all you've got is a 30-second sample to play for a website, right? So so we launched that partly to help the crate digging experience, and I think the eventual goal was always to sort of see that as a performance tool. The new CDJ 3000s, you can kind of log in. We've got offline FLAC now.
You're talking about Beatport Link, right?
Yeah, we don't call it that anymore.
Oh, dear.
No, sorry, it was too confusing apparently. So it's just Beatport streaming.
Okay, right.
People were more comfortable with that.
Sorry.
And so so now you can just log into your controller and pull back all of the playlists that you can create on your mobile as you're going. We try to make the process of track selection and performance as easy as we possibly can.
Absolutely.
Still a long way to go. Right? And some of that's to do with the evolution of hardware, the sort of consumer appetite for trading in their old kit for their new kits, as people invest a lot of money in in things, but also the adoption of live venues, clubs to accommodate for this sort of thing. So we will for a while be in that sort of hybrid situation, but our streaming product grows continuously in a really nice way, around sort of 30 to 40%, I think, each year.
Oh wow! That's
but our downloads are growing, and I think that's also part of that accessibility element. And I think that somebody might start now with Beatport as that sort of hobbyist to try using, say, our DJ app, which is a very fun product that we just won an award last year, I think it was.
Congrats.
For it's great. It's you don't need any of the hardware. You can just use it through the browser. You amazing. Can back-to-back DJ with your mates online.
That's awesome. That's quite a cool concept.
And if somebody has a subscription to Beatport, then they can also come in and listen. So you can sort of create these like virtual clubs.
Well, obviously, look, I'm sorry to jump in, but obviously I know we'll come on to it in a bit, but obviously you had some advisory roles at like Facebook and things. Is there any, am I touching on secrets that I shouldn't be? Is there any plan to get Beatport on VR to actually sort of incorporate that in more detail?
We already have one integration with my brain is failing me. But there is already one of these integrations with one of these sort of online VR. I think it's maybe mixed reality services.
That's quite cool. Like I've had a little go on it, and it's, don't get me wrong, you've not got the real knobs to touch, but it's still like you look at it and you've got a full proper professional setup, and like it's a cool experience.
I think so. I think it's just very accessible, and I think absolutely. If you want to try anything these days, technology has made it pretty easy for most people. Like, you want to learn how to play the piano,
absolutely.
Watch a YouTube video, like that didn't exist in my day. And I think DJing, being electronic is ripe for trying to encourage more people to do it. And what we did a study around the hobbyist market a little while ago, and one of the sort of, I suppose, surprising things for me was people don't start DJing or make music always because they want to be professional. They do it because it's instead of trying to find something to watch on Netflix.
Absolutely,
which is stuff of madness most of the time. So it's just a leisure pursuit. It's not meant for performance or anything like that. And I think some will naturally evolve that way, but for a lot, it's just they just find it enjoyable. I mean, I have a controller at home. I have no intention of DJing professionally, but every now and again I get the controller out, and I've got obviously access to a lot of music, and and it's just fun. It's just a different way of listening to tracks. It's way more sort of lean in, to use a sort of Silicon Valley parlance, but it's, to me, it's a fun thing to do that could theoretically be a profession for some. But Beatport, I think, has for a long time been more on the professional end. And I think what I know that it wants to embrace that sort of burgeoning sort of DJ curious, and all of the things that come from that. And as we discussed earlier, often DJing is the bit that starts somebody on their musical journey in dance music, because they're a music fan that wants to sort of have that lean-in experience. And then the very natural thing is to then go into the production side and perhaps then become a record label and publisher and blah blah blah. Right? So it's all connected.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, obviously that's been quite heavily focused on DJing, but obviously then we've got the producer side and helping them actually create their own tracks. And obviously we've already mentioned the contractual element, but looking at things like Loop Cloud and God, I've forgotten. That's all right. Loop Cloud and Plugin Boutique. Sorry, it was in there. What are you looking to develop them more? Is that an area that you're looking to put more focus as well? And also then, sorry to keep on the question, but then obviously you've also acquired things like Amp Suite, which is obviously then looking at the label. Is the goal just to become an absolute electronic music powerhouse and cover every element?
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't think any of us are delusional enough to believe that we will control every single factor. And in fact, well, I don't know that we want to. I don't think it's healthy as an ecosystem for one company to own the whole thing end to end. But we are in the fortunate position where we're a long established company, and that's not very common all the time. And we can invest in trying to make a better community and an ecosystem that all of the people that we rely on, the music buying public, and the DJs, right, and also the producers and the record labels, that they're all connected to us.
Absolutely, yeah.
Outside of whether we had any of these other things you just mentioned, the Beatport store relies on all of that, and that's still our focus. And so we launched a thing called Beatport Studio a little while ago, which is really the coming together of Loop Cloud and Plugin Boutique. And we essentially democratized that, I think, better because we created a subscription product, so that instead of somebody having to find I don't know, £200-300 for a plugin, they can just borrow it for a while as part of a subscription.
Like
and I think that's a really neat thing.
Well, once again, so it's that accessibility you're trying to create, correct, right? This is for everyone. I love that.
Yeah, otherwise it becomes a sort of, the privilege of those that have the
money.
The money, right? And I don't think that's okay. I think we're we as a sort of human race are moving past some of that, I hope, at least. So yeah, look, that's, we the more people playing in our world, the better. The more people performing, whether it's to their mates at a house party or in a club, is good for the store.
Absolutely.
People making music, that's good for the record label community because there's more music to choose from. And then hopefully the quality of the music continues to be good and high for everything I just mentioned. So it's all connected, and we're here to support every sort of element of it, really.
You're creating the connections, if anything, right? You're giving people the hub to make it happen.
I think this is the thing that Rob really spotted, was that because he and I worked at a company called Ingrooves together, which is something that he founded, and I helped him with the international piece of it for the best part of a decade. And I think he was a sort of wannabe DJ and all the rest of it back in the day. He's got good stories and fun stories around that. But I think this is born out of passion.
Absolutely, yeah.
Right.
And I think that's very clear. Let's be honest. I look at your history and what we're talking about today. I think that's probably one of the most obvious things about you, buddy. Is definitely passionate. Found musician or not.
Yeah,
very passionate.
I think without that, why does anyone do this? I mean, no one would do this unless you actually enjoyed it. I mean, there's easier ways of making a living.
Well, talking about Libyan, obviously, it was great to learn about your introduction through Sony and what a spot of luck that was. Obviously, I say luck, obviously, opportunity created from you. But then you went on to become general manager at Warner, which was fantastic. What a fantastic achievement to start. And then certainly, and obviously not to sort of kind of jump ahead too much, but you use that opportunity to then once again be this innovator in, the independent artist space and created Level Music, this DIY digital distribution service. This is quite a while back now. Where does the inspiration for something like that come from when it simply just didn't exist?
Yeah, so that one's kind of an interesting one. So what happened there was the former, and this is a lesson in network. And honestly, like, if I can sort of almost swear on the podcast, don't be a dick.
Yeah, this isn't right? For kids, don't
Yeah, like be kind to those around you, because you'll never know when you'll need them, right? And I was very lucky. So there was a chap called Vinny Frieda who was the COO at Ingrews. And during the period of time where Rob and Vinny and myself had left Ingrews, we obviously all went off and did other things. And Vinny went off to be chief data officer at Warner for a period of time.
Okay.
And so he'd had this conversation with a chap called Elias Seton, who's now CEO at SoundCloud.
Oh, wow.
And at the time he was running kind of independent music at Warner. And they'd had some sort of offsite, and they were kind of looking at what were the opportunities for Warner. And Warner at the time didn't have any real good attachment to independent artists, and that, as we've discussed, is one of those things that sort of evolved and changed over time. And at the time, I think Universal had this thing called, was it Spin Up, and I think Sony had Record Union. Like, there was a kind of like a sort of an attachment elsewhere, and they thought, well, here's an opportunity. And so I got this call. Well, Vinny said, look, I'm going to put you in touch with Elia gave me a call, and he said, we want you to come in and build a version of TuneCore. And my response to him was, I'm not going to do that. TuneCore already exists. Why would you try and do that? That's not smart. And you're Warner, right? So I thought differently about it. And I thought what actually they could do was, and what I learned when I got there was that there was a real need for this, which was the various A&R teams around the world were kind of in this situation where they'd come from this old world of signing records to the new world of signing records, which is far faster, much more fluid. And they were all doing the same stuff, right? They were all looking at kind of hockey stick growth of tracks on Spotify and seeing whether it was signed somewhere or whether they could come in and steal the track. Or they were looking at kind of the various social media data aggregating platforms that are out there, just trying to spot trends and doing what they should be doing, and sort of feeling the communities out, and and trying to sort of have that ear to the ground, which had this sort of very heavy data element to it. And I thought, okay, well, this is interesting. So they've got that problem. And then I spoke to a few other folks at the company, and there was this sort of like general theme of it was quite hard to bring a record in its sort of singularity into the company, because the format had always been this very sort of more established way of doing it, where there were lawyers involved, and there was an operations person, a label manager, and label head, and all these like signatories to sign off on it, right? And all these people would have to get involved in like just getting a record out the door, right? And crazy. And you meant, you sort of talked about earlier with TuneCore DistroKid. It's it's just not like that anymore. And so I thought, okay, well, this is interesting. There's sort of opportunity for a couple of things. One, to help the A&R folks nurture relationships in a very artist-friendly, light touch way, which is, I like what you're doing. Bring your record into this platform, Level Music. It goes through all the Warner deals. So essentially you have the same pipeline access to retail that you would if you were signed fully. We'll keep an eye on it. We'll have this line of communication open. And if we see something working, then we'll sort of be able to sort of turn on a few sort of marketing triggers. And so Eli was running ADA, and ADA at the time had a bunch of Spotify playlists. The name of them escapes me, but they owned them and they controlled them. And so that was going to be sort of one of the routes that we could take a record and kind of lift it up slightly, if the A&R team wanted to do that. Cool. And so sort of behind the scenes, you had, I built this with the team, this sort of BI, Microsoft Power BI analytics on all of this proprietary data that the platform had, because we were distributing the records.
Of course.
But the design of the platform was, to quote my marketing guy, it was designed for the YouTube generation, and what we meant by that was people that expected instant gratification.
Yeah.
You know, in the world of the YouTuber, you create something, you upload it, it's live.
Yeah.
In digital distribution, that just at that time wasn't the case. Not really, right? Because you know, you'd ingest it into a system, you then send it out to the retailer. The retailer would then put it live at some point in the future once they ingest it, right?
Yeah.
But these creators had no concept of all of the gubbins that went on in the music industry. And I knew I couldn't really change it. But one of the things that I think that I did that made sense was I took away when people were entering the metadata, I took away most of the stuff that I didn't think was relevant, including a release date. Because release dates had no bearing or relevance to these people that just wanted the record up and out. Right, because there was no marketing plan. You weren't trying to hit like a sort of like, you know, a moment in time of future where suddenly this impact date was going to make a difference. It's like there was none of that. And so I simplified down the metadata creation process, which meant that data validation was easier. And so I think we were better and faster at getting records out the door. And we had this sort of idea around building this community, you know, artists first, you know, we did stuff like South by we had just a studio that was running throughout the whole time where artists could sort of, you know, get half an hour to an hour, you know, with an engineer, finish off a track, whatever, like it was a bit of support. And that was a sort of early real life version of what we were then trying to sort of going to build around community through, you know, newsletters and webinars and all this kind of stuff. So anyway, there's a lot about level. I don't know if we need to go anymore.
Well, to be fair, that kind of segues to transitions nicely into in-groups, right? Because obviously it seems to me that you took a lot, and maybe this is a question I should pose rather than assuming, right? Is actually a lot of what you sort of learned and took away from Warner is then sort of, let's say, shaped what you were doing with Rob in-groups.
In-groups came first.
Okay. Oh my God. Oh, sorry. That's terrible.
It's okay. So no, I mean this.
So what you took away from in-groups and then shaped that at Warner instead, then, because that was because in-groups was very data driven as well, right? That was about sort of providing that data stack.
I think so. Yeah, I think undoubtedly. Yeah. I think everything that I've learned over time has impacted the next thing that I've done.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, but it was different for me because it was an artist first platform, whereas in-groups was always, for the majority of the time, label first.
Right, okay.
We did get closer to doing the artist stuff because there was a period of time where all the sort of big distribution companies created these label services divisions, which were essentially, we were running campaigns alongside managers and record labels. And, you know, some of it was financing, some of it was kind of using our network of third parties, whether it was, you know, PR companies or record pluggers or designers or whatever it might be. And so, there had been an element of that, but level was slightly different for me. It was slightly unfamiliar territory in the sense of in fact, I had never built consumer-facing tech, which is how I saw it. And actually, Jeremy Sirota, somebody you definitely have on the show.
Merlin,
who is now the CEO of Merlin. At the time, he was a Warner lawyer, and he became my lawyer, attached to my project. And he was absolutely brilliant and saved me probably an awful lot of pain. There's all sorts of stuff you need to know about things like if you create something where effectively a child could sign up to, you got to put some protections in place, you know. And,
of course.
And we built, we did it, you know, we did it in less than a year. We built this thing that worked end to end in about 6 months.
Amazing.
And with a fairly small team as well. I just sort of squirreled away and did this thing. It was very little kind of input from the rest of the business, to be honest. And, you know, we did this, you know, kind of age gating concept with parental approvals and stuff. I would probably not have thought of that, if I'm honest. Right? Because the in-groups thing didn't require it.
Of course,
right? Because you would do a contract before you gave access to a system. And that was all done in a very sort of offline way. So I think... But I wanted to do it because it was a challenge.
Of course.
But yes, undoubtedly, my learnings from working in record companies, working with artists there, and, you know, all of the kind of digital music stuff that I'd done prior to in-groups all helped.
Yeah, of course.
Absolutely, it's all helped, for sure.
Well, also coming on to that, obviously, as I mentioned earlier, you've had a lot of advisory work. You look at Facebook, Empire, iMusician, Rotor Videos, Treble, Mood Agent, the various different organisations in different elements, whether it's direct record labels, or it's digital distribution, whether it's marketing, and so on and so forth. What unique challenges do these bring, and how do they then shape what you learn and what you take into the next position?
Yeah, when I left Warner, I felt like I didn't want to just do distribution anymore. It had been my career, and I was very grateful for it. But I'm just curious by nature.
I think that's great.
And I didn't quite know what to do. I was very lucky because when I left Warner, the year before that, I'd spoken to Ghazi, who owns Empire, and he and I had a conversation about me going in and helping him with this company he'd built, which at the time was probably, I think it was around 25 to 30 people. It's now something like 200, 300 people around the world. It's massive, right?
Yeah.
But he was just in that sort of like fast accelerant based on the hard work that he and Nima and others had put into the business beforehand. And so he wanted to kind of expand out into other markets. That's what I sort of was known for, like the international guy.
Yeah.
Which is what Americans always thought of me as, because I wasn't in America. And he very graciously sort of brought me in and to help him with that. And that sort of formed the basis of this idea that I could do this kind of advisory work. And very quickly I started to pick up other bits and pieces, really. And what I found was that people wanted that experience and knowledge that you just sort of touched on there. And it was very different to the sort of work I'd done before. I'd always worked for a company, in a company, or owned a company. And so all of a sudden I was kind of like not really in the team, sort of team adjacent. And that was, I mean, personally, that was a slightly different challenge. On the one hand, I enjoyed the freedom. And on the other hand, it didn't feel like I was as involved as I perhaps had always done before. But I was learning at a much faster rate than I had previously, and I enjoyed that. Like I really enjoyed that. I think after a while though, and this is kind of how the Beatport thing really manifested, is that I'd done consultancy for Rob to help them launch the streaming platform and the Hype product that I now run at the company, which is sort of an early stage label growth product that we have. And then he brought me back to run the M&A process for the acquisition of Label Radar, which we should mention, and Sweet, which we've kind of mentioned. And then at the end of it, he sort of said, we've got these businesses. Do you want to come in and run them? And so that's where the music services division came from, because he'd already acquired Loop Masters, which has the Loop Cloud product, and Plugin Boutique, and he'd already bought DJ City, and that team sort of became Beat Source, or running Beat Source, as well as DJ City, which also still exists. And so he put together kind of those two sides of the kind of the process, or the life cycle of music, if you will. But he knew as well as anyone does that there's this whole other bit that happens in the middle. It's like, okay, the music comes out of the studio, now what? Like, how does it get to Beatport? And so he'd obviously spotted this opportunity, and he obviously knows my background, and so I think I was a good fit for picking that up. And it's been just under 3 years that I've been doing that. Amazing. And we've got some great products. Next year we're going to be integrating much more closely into the rest of the Beatport company, rebranding, that type of thing.
So the Beatport Group.
It is the Beatport Group, and I think it's sort of a challenge and a curse, right? Beatport's been around for 20 years, and therefore people know it as the download store, right? And so we're trying to sort of say, but we're also like, for example, we bought the majority share in IMS, Pete Tong, and and
amazing,
exactly, and that's great as well, because that gives us that sort of B2B community thing at a conference level. Definitely, we can kind of, Ben Turner still runs it, but we give him an awful lot of support, which I know he's very grateful for. And obviously having Pete involved is superb. Of course, sort of his star power and his direct involvement. I mean, he's really instrumental in it. And it's great for us because we get to sort of be part of that bigger conversation that goes on without it like having to be us selling a product. We just sort of just be present. Which is great. I don't know.
No, mate, that's beautiful. So I think it's been very evident, right? You've had a phenomenal career in music. I think it's spanning over sort of kind of 20 years plus, not to sort of picture over your age or anything.
No, that's okay.
You might have already sort of covered this, but it's great to get your sort of your opinion. What's the biggest change that you've witnessed as the industry's evolved? Obviously, I know we've put a real big focus on how it's gone digital and things like that, but is there anything that really stands out to you and go, oh my God, that's either exciting or not exciting? You know, what's the biggest change you've witnessed?
Well, it's a good one because to me it's technology. You know, I came into the industry in the late 90s. And whilst there was definitely sort of the beginnings of digital audio at that time, you know, if I think back, it was dial-up modem territory, early stage broadband, and as a consequence, digital music. Yes, there were pioneers that predate some of this stuff, sure, but it wasn't a reality. Not for the majority of people, not really. But I did join at that sort of crucial moment. In fact, my friend Eamon Ford has just published a book on the year 1999, which is a very pivotal year. Because it's that sort of Napster moment that the industry had. So do go and check that out. I think it's literally called 1999. Something like that. Eamon Ford, go and check it out. All good bookshops.
Nice little plug there, love it.
It's good. It's really, if you want to sort of understand what that change was like, it really sort of tracks that whole period of time. And really, I guess to that point, that's the biggest change because if you think about what it did, is it and I'm going to use this word democratized because I think it did for both the music fan as well as the music creator. And on the show, the podcast that I've been running for years, I always had this phrase that the only two important things in the music industry is the artist and the fan. Right. And anything else is either enhancing that relationship or it's getting in the way.
Absolutely.
Right?
I like that.
And that to me is sort of, where I sort of see all this. But yeah, it was that sort of ability to listen to more music than ever before, and be interested in lots of other things that you perhaps may just never have got around to listening to, because would you have taken that risk to buy that £15.99 CD just because the cover art looked good? I don't know, but maybe most unlikely. And you certainly wouldn't have had that kind of ability to put together these incredible playlists on a streaming service. So I think it changed that, and I think obviously the ability for anyone with a MacBook now to make music and distribute music, just phenomenal.
At the same time, though, sort of having it's once again, kind of to use your expression, it's a bit of a blessing and a curse, right? Obviously, it makes it incredibly easy for the artists to get their tracks, their songs out there. But at the same time, exactly as you say, now you're either talking a 69p or £1.19 track that you can download, or alternatively, you're getting it. It's what I think is something stupid like 10,000 streams is equal to one album sale. Whereas back in the day, you got $15.99 for one album. It was great. So actually, from a royalties perspective, it's a massive curse for the artist. And now there's so many more artists that are able to do it. You've got more competition. But then for the user, for the listener, it's just a piece of piss now. So it's what gives with one hand takes with the other in many ways, right?
Yes. I think it's slightly disingenuous to equate somebody listening to a stream sometimes by accident, right, to the idea of making that commitment to go and buy a body of work.
Of course, absolutely,
right? And I think that really all we're seeing is that slight dilution of basket value. Right. The consumer is spending at most whatever the sort of the subscription amount is for that one music subscription product that they're using. And I think there is a trend to breaking that apart slightly in the sense of Beatport is a very particular type of streaming product. I can almost guarantee that every subscriber to our streaming product is also an active paid subscriber of a Spotify. And Apple, a Tidal, a Deezer, whatever it might be. Right. If I didn't work at the company, I might be. So it's and we've seen the same thing in TV, right? Goodness, I have all of them, right?
It's insane.
So I think we'll continue to see a little bit of that happening. And so I don't think we should, sort of lose hope. I think it's worth saying that having been a failed musician, right, and making kind of copies of CDRs that I might give out to my mates. There was no path to retail at all for me at that point, and there was certainly no concept of me selling any of it. Right?
Of course.
It's not a real expectation that just because you can create music that anyone would want to go and buy it.
Of course, absolutely. Right? This is what I was saying earlier about the accessibility to people that don't necessarily have the talent, and I put that loosely because
and so I think you've got to kind of trace back to that idea that, like, why do people do this? And I'm sure there's a frustration point, right, where you've gone from doing it because you love it and you want to share it with friends, family, and then maybe there's sort of you create a little bit of a community that builds and builds and grows, and you think, oh, maybe this could be a career. Sure. Right. And that is a legit way of building,
of course,
your career, right? Because you'll do it over a good period of time. You'll learn, you'll get better, you'll create fans for life through your live gigs. Love all of that, right? But I think it's a mistake to think that just because you can put something on Apple Music that you should then give up your day job. I just wish we could have that conversation a little bit more, rather than this idea that, well, a stream isn't the same as selling a CD. Really?
Yeah.
It's such a surprise.
Of course.
Like, such a surprise. Oh my, what? See, what now? Oh, hell. I've been kidding myself all these years. So I'm being facetious on purpose. It's just a kind of a reality of kind of where we are with music. And I think there are ways, and people have found them through Patreon or whatever it might be. Bandcamp is another good example. If you are serious about your career, you will surround yourself by people that will help you, whether that's a distribution company or a manager or whatever it might be. You will build your fan base, and you will create your career. Just don't expect it to happen overnight.
Well, so on that note, and if you was, and obviously, we'll go on to a bit more sort of intricate advice in a second, but if there was sort of kind of one thing you could say to people now who are trying to navigate this landscape, what would you say to them?
I would ask yourself, why are you doing it?
Fair.
Right? What do you expect, want, dream to come out of it?
Yeah. What's your goal? Yeah.
And I think just be real with yourself.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of disillusioned people out there, being honest. Look, it's a sad case, right?
Have the aspiration.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, always have the aspiration, right? Have the interest. Do it because you love it. Yeah. Do it because you think you're making something that somebody else would care about.
I love it.
Right? As much as like it means something to you.
Yeah.
Right? And I think, for example, like if you're making music just because you want to do it, don't expect anyone else to like it. Yeah. And that's okay too.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So I think there's that. And I think the industry will continue to get better at this thing that it's doing. And we'll just very briefly gloss over this. There is an issue at the moment with what's called stream mining.
Okay, right? Is this the autoplay thing over and over again?
No, it's more to do with the and we're just going to say it, criminal gangs that are creating a lot of music, putting it out online and using bots to stream it. Hacking legit accounts to then just stream their tracks that they've uploaded a few times, so it gets kind of hidden in the sort of mass of it. It's a big problem that the industry's trying to solve at the moment. And all of that is not helping that dilution of the royalty pot.
Absolutely.
Right? So if it's sort of, if we're losing money out the sides in the same way as we always did with retail, where people would nick a CD, right? I mean, retailers used to have that sort of built into their model. It was 5% or something. They knew they would lose on average. So, and I think the problem is that the streaming problem is higher than it should be.
Probably easier, right? If you can code it to hack, then let's be honest, it's pretty straightforward to do.
I think so. I think that's true. I mean, we at Beatport don't suffer from it too much, in part because our streaming service is more in its infancy. We have, a much higher ARPU, average revenue per user, than any other DSP, purely because we have a higher subscription rate. fewer subscribers because it's specialist.
I was about to say,
and they don't stream as much because
they're
just checking out records. So that sort of per player rate is through the roof compared. Yeah.
What do you? I was going to say, do you find that? And I think you may have even answered this right. Obviously, being I want to say niche, but you're certainly not niche. You know, you cover a whole array of genres within electronic music, and that's continuing to grow, as I've personally seen. Yeah. You know, do you find that because you're able to sort of kind of vet and do everything that you're doing to try and make sure the music's correct and blah 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 blah, is actually these people just want to leave you alone because they're gonna get caught, or is it still
they're easier to spot for us? I think. But you know, even us, you know, we've started to employ the services of Beatport, which is one of the first sort of companies that came out and helped educate the industry to the problem that it was having. Because we don't want to get caught with this.
Of course,
we deeply care about the community. We want the money to go to the rights holders and by extension the creators. Because if we aren't paying attention to that, then the whole thing will fail.
Yeah, of course, absolutely.
So no, it's crucial. But yeah, we're able to monitor it probably in a more easy way than these massive companies like Spotify.
Yeah.
You know, it's just easier for us to spot kind of illegitimate activity.
Yeah. Well, you might have you've literally just touched base on what my next question was going to be, and that's what I think maybe an element of it. I was going to ask you sort of what technology are you looking forward to? From the sounds of it, we've already covered what technology you're not looking forward to, and that's people taking the piss on the streaming. But you know, is there anything exciting happening in the world, in the world of sort of the digital distribution, label service, etc., that you're looking forward to?
Well, I'm really excited to see where the label Radar product will
Absolutely,
go.
Yeah, of course.
You know, I think it's pretty unique. There's not really anything else that exists that's like it.
So what is it for the
Yeah, the guys, Derek and Ed, who are the co-founders of it, that work with me at the moment, they did something that I wish I'd thought of. And just to sort of relive a moment in the 90s at Sony, you know, pushing the postcart around. And a lot of what was in that postcart were things called demos. So,
of course.
Right, in jiffy bags, they would come in the mini discs, CDRs, vinyl sometimes, right? And they go on these executives' desks, and the executives sort of look at them and go, and they'd sort of sweep them off into the round filing cabinet on the floor. You know, and it's just because they didn't really have the time for it. And also they would come through in this sort of like various formats, like no context or too much context. Like, what are you going to do, right? And they would sort of more likely rely on their professional networks to find the next biggest thing, or be at certain venues that were notorious for bringing through the next bands. But of course, in digital music, that became even worse. People would put email addresses on their websites that said demos@labelx.com, right? And so then these email accounts would fill up with emails from people either giving massive essays about them with WAV files attached, which would then bounce out of their SMTP server. And, you know, chaos would ensue.
Absolutely.
Dropbox links, SoundCloud links, like FLAC files, MP3s, you know, the whole thing.
Yeah.
And A&Rs would just be like, I mean,
where'd you start?
Labels like Defected arguably get something like 1,000 demos a week.
That's crazy.
Like, what are you going to do with that?
That's crazy. You get rid of a couple, you got another 20 in there.
It's impossible. And what Ed and Derek figured out, and this is the smart bit, is that the people sending the music to these labels aren't annoying, right?
Yeah, of course.
They are music fans. Right, and they are fans very specifically of your record label. And in dance music, as we established earlier, that's an important piece of it.
Absolutely.
Right? The brand itself carries. They're also fans of your artist. They want to emulate your artist. They want to be involved in the story.
It's a massive compliment, but also a massive hassle.
Right. So, but like I think a lot of things with technology, that it's enabled. If you think about social media, it's enabled an artist to communicate in one very simple, short message. To a lot of people. Whereas once upon a time, that was like old fan clubs, which I remember being part of. You have to like send a letter out in the post, and you'd have some intern putting stamps on like loads of letters and sending them out the door, right? You don't need that anymore. Your social media is like kind of easy, right? Assuming the algorithm plays nice. But so this is a sort of, it's not the same as that, but it's something similar whereby the way that it works is if you come in, say, through Toolroom or Armada or Defected or whoever, we have 3,500 record labels that use it. You come in through the websites, Typically, it's the first route in. And you can submit your track to the label, and you do it through our platform. So where you end up eventually is on our platform. And what you get to do is create something you're very used to doing, because it's just a profile, right? It's like your Instagram link and a bit of biography and maybe some links to your YouTube videos or whatever that you might have. Basically fill out your kind of pitch form, if you like, to the record label. So then one of the clever things that they did is they said to the artist, the producer, they said, send the track, the full track, but pick out the best 20 seconds of the track, right? So now the A&R person on the other end is sitting there with essentially like imagine a Spotify playlist. A playlist of all these 20-second clips. So they can kind of get in the morning, press play, do their emails, listen to music, right? And when something catches their attention, they can go, right, listen to the full track. Do I like the full track? Yes, I do. Right, go and see who this artist is. And then you get this kind of like nice sort of template, standardized, familiar way of looking at who this artist is. Click the links, go and just sort of, go off and see more about it. And then you can message the artist directly, right? But the clever thing that they did even more so was that when the A&R person presses play, a message is sent back to the producer.
Okay.
If you think about it in the first example of the offline world, you'd send the Jiffy bag off on CD.
Sit and wait.
And nothing would happen. Like almost every single time, nothing would happen. And eventually resentment would take hold, right? And you might just give up, right? This way, they're like, defected, heard my record.
That's cool.
Right?
Yeah, that's nice.
And we have other things like where the A&R person, if the record's not quite right, they can just add the artist to the watch list, because they might have seen like, they've got, growth in their socials, or actually the production was good, but the record's not quite right. For us, maybe like the genre's off or whatever it might be, but I'm going to watch this artist. That is also communicated. So now you're in a situation as an artist, like they heard me and they're watching me, right? Exactly. So, there's a few other things like that in the platform. And the other thing that we did recently was we opened that up to allow all of the artists to connect to each other. So it's a bit like LinkedIn.
That's cool. So once again, bringing this community together, right?
Precisely that. It was like Derek actually had this sort of, aha moment where he was like, wow, we have like 250,000 producers in our network and none of them know each other exist. Right? So actually one of the things that we did is we opened up what we call label stats. So it's kind of like a ticker tape that runs on the artist login. So they can see, that artist has got signed and there's this remix competition, which I'll mention in a second, that's gone live. And this person's been added to the watch list, right? And you can now leave a review about a record label, right? So you've got this like full kind of communication layer that's built in the sort of modern way that the internet works as, but it's in that sort of very specific use case, and everybody participates and everybody gets involved. Remix contests. We now host arguably the biggest remix contests in dance music. We've just done, for example, one with Kylie Minogue and the Blessed Madonna. We've done a bunch with Tiesto. Like Toolroom do them all the time with us. Pretty much at every big remix contest, you're probably going to end up on Label Radar for it now.
That's amazing.
And what we do is we help the labels have a place to sort of send people. And we can do sort of like label growth tooling around gating the access to the stem pack that's made available for the remix behind, say, follow a Spotify playlist or email capture or something like that. And so really what we're saying to the labels is this is a way of building that sense of community and engaging with your fans in this really like lent in, engaged manner, as opposed to sort of social media, which is all very sort of whatever. And it creates really long-lasting relationships. Also, records get signed all the time through that format, outside of the kind of just demo submission, because a lot of the time labels are looking for the next great hot artist.
Of course, absolutely,
right? And it's a great way of sort of doing it within the context of, well, I've got the plan to release a record. Also, if you think about it, it's kind of genius, because you're also saying to this massive artist community, there's a new record out, go and listen to it. Absolutely. So there's lots of things that basically just make sense and are of equal value to both sides. And I think that's a really important thing that any new technology should do is build value for both sides of the interaction. one other very cool thing that they did is they we haven't done too much with it just yet, but I do want to do more eventually, which is they have a fan app. Okay. So music fans can go and listen to the same 20-second samples and do that sort of, I'm told, I don't know, I've never used one, dating app style, where you can sort of thumbs up, thumbs down,
swipe left, swipe right.
Correct. And all of that information is then made available to the record label. So if you think about what's happened at that point, for the very first time ever, the record label gets to test a demo before they've signed it with the intended audience.
That's really cool.
And if they do sign it, they can then communicate it to the...
Oh, by the way, this is released now.
Correct.
Fantastic.
And so they sort of gamified that for the fans, where if you like a track, it gets added to like your kind of liked list. I'm sure it has a better name than that. And then when it's released, you get notified through the app, right? So you've then got that sort of... And you get told you're the 124th person to have ever listened to this demo, right? Or whatever the number is. And so you get that sort of bragging rights thing of like,
I was on
it, you know, and then you got signed, and you build like, you know, again, it's just another way of building that sort of like relationship to the music.
Of course.
And just in a modern way. I just think it's always going to evolve and change. So I'm excited for this product.
Absolutely. I think that's beautiful. You know, for the listener, right, it kind of feels like they're bringing it to the table, like you know, being able to see it firsthand, vote for it, and if it gets voted in, it's like, yes, I kind of was part of what made it happen. And what an interactive play, you know, to get because obviously you think, right, from a label's perspective, you release the stuff, okay, if people follow your label or they hear the music, great, you know, they've been able to sort of react. But this is more of a proactive way of getting them involved, and once again just creates that higher retention. There's more sort of visibility of the label, of the artist, before they've even released the track. I think that's an absolutely fantastic concept. Sorry it wasn't yours.
And it's funny because when I was very first thinking about getting into it, I sat down with a chap called Chris Stone, who my father knew through other means, who worked at BMG, and he was fascinated by this idea of how poor the demo submission process was, and we tried to figure this out. We would never have got there in the way that the guys did, right? We just wouldn't have done. But I remember sitting down and sketching this out with my old business partners on the first record label that I did, and this guy Chris, who had this sort of long history in the music industry. Anyway, I was going to say something about... Sorry. Can I just mention something?
Please,
as we're talking about this idea of the value proposition for both sides, there's been a lot of talk about superfans, and I'm going to steal something from somebody called Ronnie Krieger, who used to work at Beatport. He posted it on LinkedIn a little while ago, and he said he's kind of like, I don't think these are his words, but he's sick of people thinking about superfans as people that spend a lot of money.
No, it's just someone that's really interested, right?
Right. So his thing was, okay, so somebody's listened to a track a lot of times. They're liking posts on social media. They're going to the gigs. They're, but they've saved up all year to go to that gig versus the person who's got a lot of money that might buy the box set, might buy the tickets and the merch and all the rest of it. Like, but they've only found their way to the gig because their mates are going. Right. Who's a super fan? Right. Like, to me, I think it's exactly what he was saying, which is it's the person or people that are interacting and involving themselves and going on that journey with the artist. It's not those that are just spending more money. And I think the industry needs to really think about some of the language they use sometimes. I just think it points people in the wrong direction. You know, I've seen all sorts of weird and wonderful technology platforms that present themselves as like, we're the solution for superfans. I'm like, okay. And it's always about extracting as much money as you possibly can from the people that can afford it, as opposed to really thinking about who the actual super fans are.
It's just
so I thought Ronnie was really on that.
I think that's a great concept. So just exactly as you say, you know, if you want to be, because you're a fan, you want to be at the forefront, and you want that insider knowledge, and giving them the ability to that. Once again, it just drives them back to you, right? If no one else is facilitating that, then, you know, good on Beatport / Label Radar. So, you know, fantastic stuff. That's right. And the sad fact of the matter is, and I appreciate your honesty about you wishing you had that. It's not actually a ridiculously far stretch from Beatport, right? In a sense that you've still got your small clip, but rather than what people want to buy, is the demo. It's the labels listening to demos, which is fantastic transition. So you've taken what you've got and just made it better for another audience. Fair play.
Yeah, I don't think it's as as simple as just, artists selling music and fan buying music. I think the technology has stretched that out.
Absolutely.
And people are interacting all along the way, whether they're, again, I think a lot of people that are making remixes on our platform or submitting them through our platform to the record labels, they're not doing it because they think they're going to get signed. They're doing it because in the same way that things like fan fiction exist, right? People aren't writing Hogwarts fan fiction right, because they think that suddenly they're going to be published and be a billionaire.
But
like,
at the
they're
same
doing
time,
it
if it does
because they love the books that Rowling wrote, and they want to write something as a fan. I think it's the same with music.
No, good. Fair play. No, I really, really appreciate that, and obviously that's wonderful. And it'd be great to. I think what Beatport's got going on, I think is just it's just otherworldly right now, right? And I think you are really differentiating yourselves apart from everyone else. And I love the interactivity that you're trying to bring to your audience. But if you don't mind, let's come back to Alex Branson a little bit, right? Because obviously we've gone through your career, but. What would you say are some of the most defining moments in your career that really shaped your direction? And you may have touched them on briefly earlier, but is there anything that really stands out to you and go, that's made me who I am, or that's chosen my path?
I put a lot of gratitude in some of the people that I've met along the way.
Fair play.
And I think I've probably tried to emulate this to a certain degree myself. I have no idea if I've been successful, but there are people that became sort of accidental mentors.
Okay.
I would say just people that bothered to give me the time of day when they probably didn't need to. And I try and do that as a general practice myself, and always have done. And so again, it's sort of that sliding doors moment of if I hadn't have met that person, this thing wouldn't have happened. And I put a lot of faith in that. So no, I think I've been incredibly sort of lucky and unlucky in the sense of I joined an industry that was just about to go through a massive period of change, and I don't think anyone could have really foreseen that at the time. And so I think that curiosity that I maintained allowed me to bother to basically earn almost nothing for a long period of my career, because I could see this digital thing happening. I was involved in it. I was one of the few people that was really bothered by it. I mean, it's mad to think back to earlier on in the career where I was working at this digital supply chain company, RightsRouter, and having conversations with labels going, yeah, you should sell your music digitally. And they're like, I don't want to do that. And I'm like, but why? Like,
bigger audience, bigger market.
And their fears were genuine. It was changing what they understood, right?
Well, it's turning a challenge into opportunity as well. But it had already
happened.
Yeah.
Right? It wasn't like, and I think that's sort of learning the things there are that you can control and things that you can't. You know, the industry's going through, it's the same process that it went through in its Napster era, where it's just suing people. Like, you know, and in many ways, it's just saying, whoa, hang on a minute. Like, this is all to do with AI and you know, the sort of using other people's works to train and make other works.
Well, that's a whole different conversation now, let's be honest. You know,
sure.
I was talking to Paddy Fletcher on our last podcast. He's a composer and is talking about how, you know, the AI generated music is sort of, you know, affecting his business and what he's doing for sync and in film and all that type of stuff. You know, for you guys, obviously, let's be honest, right, royalties companies are having an absolute nightmare on it. You've only got to go to any conference about music, and let's be honest, AI is, you know, the high topic in the show. Is Beatport doing it? You know, what's Beatport? What's yours and Beatport? Well, maybe for yourself first. I don't know if you can speak for Beatport, but what's your take on it?
I think, fortunately, my take is the one shared by Beatport. We publicly joined kind of a loose alliance with everything from major record companies to other DSPs. To basically say we want to protect the human in all of this. My personal belief, which again is echoed in the Beatport thing, is that electronic music is electronic music. And it has, for its entirety of its time, used electronic devices to make music. And of course, there was outrage at the drum machine and the sampler and all the rest of it. I mean, you wouldn't even think twice about it now. I don't think this is any different. I think that there is a difference, though, between, say, prompt-based music generation, as in make me a track that sounds like David Guetta and Martin Garrix or something like that, and then, I've got a track. But it sounds literally like if you put those two records together, because that's what it's done, right? I don't think that's a particularly good thing, healthy thing. I don't know what purpose any of that music serves, if I'm honest. I think it's interesting to think about, I think Mark Mulligan, maybe somebody else has talked about this. Oh, God, if I've got that wrong. Will Page. I'm just going to say Will Page, Mark Mulligan, one of the two said this, or both, where you've got that sort of idea of the sort of two-tiered royalty system going on, and that's sort of being... It's already happening, you know. Spotify called music, functional music. So sleep sounds, I suppose, like, you know, rain and whatever. Like, that's not music composition, and that's not therefore going to attract the same royalty rate. I think again that's just the industry trying to work its way around all of this stuff, whereas it didn't really have to think about it before and just sort of let it happen. I believe that AI has a really interesting role to play in the composition process and track creation. I think that there's a sort of general theme of in my world, and I had a very fortunate, privileged upbringing. I make no secret of that. But I think, having been a classically trained trumpet player and having had parents that could drive me to music lessons and pay for private lessons and all the things that I got, you know, as somebody from privilege, is not always the case, and therefore is it okay to expect somebody to have had the 1,000 hours of piano lessons so that they can create dance music on a keyboard? I don't think that's okay. I think there's something incredibly wrong with that concept. But I think that AI can help people learn, and absolutely. I think it can help shortcut. I remember seeing a demo, a recent MEDEM, weirdly, and it was the Sony Labs presenting, I think it was an unfinished symphony from somebody.
Hybrid. No, that's finished symphony, sorry.
Yeah. Yes,
one of my favourite tracks.
Yes, and I've met them, and they're fabulous human beings. They'd finished a classical composition that was famously not finished. It was Beethoven. And they presented a finished version, and it would end on that sort of perfect cadence that would end the song. And then they went, and then here's another version of it, and then here's another version of it, and it was AI taking that sort of learning and finishing, and it was just really a demonstration of what it could do, right? Absolutely. So in that sort of like original composition format, you know, isn't that a better shortcut to that sort of idea pad? You know, what could it do? How could it work? Isn't it just a faster, easier way of helping the composition process? That is, you know, if you think about, like, you know, selecting samples, right?
I was going to say, Christ, you can grab loops and everything from online and use them royalty free in all your productions anyway, right?
Is that
different?
is that process of running through menus and selecting the loop creative? I'd argue no. Right? But having the wherewithal to try a bunch of different versions till there's something that you like, based on something you've done,
of course,
is
absolutely, and also you've got the age old DJ argument as well. If you want to get the big gigs, you've got to produce. Now, I've DJed enough years to realise you tend to be one or the other. You're either a DJ or a producer, and if you just want to get main room ministry, or you want to be main room amnesia in main room amnesia in Ibiza. The necessity of going and producing tracks, which is a task you don't want to be involved in, you don't want to do, is there a simpler route, or is there this necessary evil? And obviously, you can get ghost produced, but then once again, is that any different from AI? It's just an electronic ghost producer, right? There's a huge argument for this.
Correct. Like, absolutely, you've hit the nail on the head. And I really wish I could remember the lady's name. She does a fantastic podcast. And she is a singer-songwriter, recording artist, and she wrote the song and produced the recording for the most part, like 90% for one of MK's biggest hits.
Oh wow, okay.
I really wish I could remember her name. Lovely lady. And she tells this story, and to exactly your point, and it's nothing to take away from MK, but it's happened forever. In fact, when I worked at Nucleus or Media Records, one of the record companies I worked for, they had this kind of almost like production outlet where they had everything from the live agent sitting in the office that was an owned business as part of the business, to 3 recording studios in the same office with the record label. We had literally a shop at the front of the store. We did our own mail orders. It was a complete sort of cottage industry, sort of birth to death type of thing, and it was based on this understanding exactly what you said. And we ran big festivals at Creamfields and things like that, arenas. The DJs would get those gigs because they had some level of like something to promote. And of course, not all of them knew how to use a keyboard. They would sit with an engineer. I'm doing air quotes. If you're listening to this as an audio podcast, I just did air quotes. I do apologize. But it's not like not everybody's talented in that way.
Absolutely.
So.
It's bloody hard.
It democratizes it further.
It really does. And let's be honest, right? As I say, if you really want to make a properly fine-tuned track that's going to be picked up by a label, that's going to be distributed through Beatport, you need something that's of good quality. And quite frankly, you might have all the creative freedom in the world and great ideas, but actually then you've got to be a software developer half the time to try and use Logic or an Ableton or a Cubase or anything like that. It's crazy the amount of gumph in there. I've sat down with, I've got some really, really good friends who to do it as their day job. They're literally just mixing and mastering for loads of people, and hopefully he'll be on soon so he can tell us a little bit more about it. But you look at it, it's a whole nother language, it's a whole world, and if you don't know it, the chances of you getting this finely tuned, polished track to send off is next to impossible, especially when your love is standing here at the decks and getting the crowd going wild. It's a crazy necessity, but and a necessary evil sometimes, I guess. Well, based on the people that are doing the bookings, right? So yeah, I think comes back to something I think I said earlier. It's like, why are you doing any of this? What is your goal? Right? Yeah, of course.
And if you want to be a professional DJ and you understand that you need to produce some records, then sure, I think AI is great for helping you achieve your goal. Whether or not you create something. If I think back to when I first heard, I don't know, a Skrillex record or something, and it was just so sonically different. Like that comes from somewhere. That sort of genre defining,
of course.
Music, and you're probably never going to achieve that with AI. I wouldn't think, because it's by nature it's just learning from what's come before.
Absolutely,
So unless you want to be that kind of genre defining artist,
but then that's when you're producing.
But that's a different
right?
reason.
Absolutely.
The music. You could be producing records that you commercially release. It could be through DistroKid or TuneCore or whatever, or running a label through AmpSuite. But you're really just creating DJ tools for yourself. Why not? Like that's okay as well.
Love it.
So I don't have any snobbery around what people are doing, but I dislike the stream mining process of just creating.
As you say, that's a criminal element, right?
I think we need to somehow figure out how to get rid of that. And there's lots of things that are being done. It's just not perfect yet.
Yeah, fair.
But we'll get better at it.
I'm sure. So coming away from AI, well, I think we kind of, I definitely took us on a tangent there. Apologies for that. No,
it's my fault.
Looking at your career, if we was to rewind, and you've got Alex Branson now, talks to young Alex Branson. Two-part question. One, what's the piece of advice you would give to him? And secondly, if it was you doing it all over again, what would you change in how you've got to where you are, or what would you change in what you did?
Goodness, I mean, I guess they're connected, aren't they?
That's why I made it a two-part question.
I've had other sliding doors moments in my life, and I often think back to them, and I wonder, that sort of choose your own adventure story. I don't remember that, sorry. But this idea of like, do I go down that path or that path?
Yeah.
There was I think it's okay to say, I was basically offered a job at Apple Music,
okay,
or iTunes as it was.
Yeah.
And it was at a weird point in my life where I was working with Rob, and we just started to. I just opened the office up in Asia. I'd already opened offices in Germany. Norway was just about to come online. I was really starting. Australia had already started, and I was having a lot of fun doing this thing. And working with Rob is always entertaining. And then this sort of job came around that would have taken me into, I thought at the time, a little bit more of a kind of corporate structure. And I hadn't really done a lot of that at that moment.
Okay.
I was curious about it. I didn't know whether I would survive it, if I'm honest. Like, I'm not
not HR compliant.
I try to be. No, I think I'm mostly okay. I just think that I know my own mind.
Yeah, fair.
People don't always want to hear that. Right? So don't know. And I wonder, what would have my life been like if I'd gone down that route and had, people hired by brand, right? I think one of the things I would definitely advise, and I got there by accident, which is knowing what the jobs market's like.
Yeah.
And, I think unless you have a great idea, like a label radar thing,
yeah,
you're typically going to go and get a job somewhere, learn some stuff, and then maybe go and create your own company or do something on your own. But to go and work at those big companies, I think, is really important.
Yeah.
I think you learn very quickly a lot of things of what you can do and what things you shouldn't do. Or how you shouldn't be in the world. And I think it suits some people better than others, but I think everybody should try. So I would definitely encourage young Alex to go and do that. I think I probably would have said do a bit more of that. I think my career has probably suffered a little bit because I haven't sort of jumped from one big company to another, but at the same time I've had the freedom,
I was going to say,
to learn a lot of things.
Pros and cons with both sides, right?
Today I still go around on this myself. Like I don't know what honestly is the right path, and I think I've put a lot of trust in it all just working out. But it comes from a place of I put the work in, and I know I do. I always have done.
I think it's the passion as well, right? You're throwing yourself into these things, and just trying to kind of keep floating around until something hits. And obviously, look, let's be honest, right? The opportunities for you have come around, and I think that's testimony to your passion and to your hard work. Is the fact that these things don't just happen. Let's be honest, right? We can talk about luck all we want, but obviously doing the right things in the right time. So look, whatever you're doing, buddy, it's clearly worked out somewhat. So I wouldn't worry too much.
Thank you. Yeah, no, and it has. Look, I'm very, very lucky. I've only ever done this, and that's kind of rare.
Amazing.
Yeah. I think of myself as a lifer for it, rightly or wrongly. And I've seen people come in and disappear again, and you can kind of spot them a mile off. I think because they often come in thinking it's all easy, and they find out it's not. And it's because unless you've got that passion, you won't make it. Because it's just not smooth running.
Well, it's a dog-eat-dog industry as well, right? It
is. It's also just, it's quite, I've used the word before, and again, I borrowed this from somebody else. It was Paul Sampson, who's the CEO and founder of Licked, and he talks about how fractured the industry is, and it is. Okay. You've got the likes of Merlin trying to bring people together. You've got trade bodies that do the same thing. Yeah. But ultimately, they're still standalone, either individuals or companies. And I don't know of other industries that are quite like it, especially when you get then, technology solutions that come along and say, we want everything in one place and we want to have one contract with one person. It's like, that isn't going to happen. Like, who are you kidding, right? And so, I don't know.
Let's be honest. I can't think of any other industries or verticals that are so diverse. You look at the amount of you go back in the day and just over time how music has evolved. We once upon a time used to be able to go electronic music. Now under EDM, Christ, there's 1,000,001 different categories, subcategories, or genres, should I say?
Yeah, we have 34 on the store, which is I think the most of any DSP.
Wow. That's just in electronic dance music.
Yeah, and that doesn't include beat source, right? Beat source has got a whole other set, right?
Yeah.
It's Yeah, and it's interesting because it evolves all the time, and I think that's exciting. Our curation team, led by Raf, is always on it. They're literally out there listening to what's going on, and we're seeing services like SoundCloud, DJ community in general. They kind of magpie things together.
Yeah.
Keep using that word. I'll stop using it. They put things together, right? And they're blending genres, right? And so that's where you're seeing kind of, for example, trance getting split on our store, and because the music that's coming into that genre isn't exactly one thing or another. And
let's be honest, the lines, as much as we're separating it with subgenres, there's also the lines are getting blurred a lot more. You look at trance and techno, used to be very, very different sounds.
Agreed.
Whereas now, Christ, I think there's 1,000,001 trance tracks that have now been remixed into techno, and essentially it's the same track just with a donk on it. And when you start seeing that blurred lines, obviously them genres all sort of kind of blending together. Now you've got a whole new genre, and it's just crazy, really, how the development and the evolution of that's gone.
It's one of the biggest topics of conversation at the company. Because one of the things that we do, which incites sometimes violence. No, I'm kidding. With the
but is this where the non-HR Alex Branson comes out punching?
No. But no, what we do, we sometimes change the metadata when we get a track submission to the store, and our reasoning for it is that we have carefully curated this 34 genre list, right? And the track is either going to fit or it's not, right? And so you might think it's indie dance, but it's actually techno or something. Right? It cannot be both. And there's actually a special page which is public. It's beatport.com/audio examples, I think. And we've gone through and we've sort of defined a playlist in each one and said this is what we think of, and we've explained why, like through the sort of descriptors of what happens in these sounds. And it's partly because sometimes people know that they can get a chart placement on the store in a certain genre because there's fewer tracks submitted or sold in that, right? And so they're gaming it. Right. That's one thing that they do. And two, it's because, I don't know, like they're just trying to, I guess, attach themselves to a different community. It's like, okay, but you got to make music for them. And you're not. So it's going in that one, right? And so we get all these wonderful emails, and they're always wonderful. Why did you put it in that genre? I've been doing this for 45 years. Like, what are you talking about? And we're like, I don't know what to tell you. It's not right.
Even then, though, right? That's kind of talking about the blurred lines or the grey lines. You're finding that the communities are starting to sort of kind of come into say, like my background. I was a trance head for many years, and then suddenly, like, you hear it's all this melodic techno from like labels like Drum Code and things like that, and you next thing you're like, hang on a minute, they're not, they're maybe a little bit slower, but it's the same melodies, same chord structures. It's just got a bit of a donk on it, as I say. And the next thing you know, now I'm a techno man, and that's kind of literally what happened with my DJing. Really started up sort of kind of Trance Sanctuary or the Gallery at the Ministry of Sound. The next thing you know, it's just like there's me going hard at Awakenings. It's a natural transition, not only for the music but for the listeners as well, right?
I think so.
Yeah,
and look, I think a lot of this is down to people's access to music. And
to be honest, I think it's also my age. I need a slightly lower BPM nowadays.
Fair enough. Easier on the heart, isn't it?
Something like that, anyway. So what's next for Alex then? Obviously, we've covered what you've been doing. We covered what Beatport are doing. But you personally, what are you looking forward to, or what are you trying to do yourself?
I'm very happy where I am. I feel like I've just sort of started on this particular journey. Next year, my personal role moves into a slightly more central role at the company, which I'm very excited about. Very grateful for. And I think really it's just to sort of continue this idea that to make everything easier for people, we've got to make better tools and services. We've got to use our relationships with other distribution companies to communicate that if they don't have a like product already, and just make it easier for people to gain access to them. I at the company we operate a variety of different subscription products, for example, and I think there's a great opportunity for us to make very sort of value rich economically viable
Once again,
products.
the accessibility element of it.
Yeah, and Beatport Studio is a good example of that sort of idea and that concept. And all credit to Gareth, who runs that team, for getting that out and live. And I think there's other things that we as a company can do just to make it easier for everybody.
Of course.
And hopefully, good music will come of it, right? That's honestly the goal. It's really simple. But personally, I think that's good for the foreseeable. But I mean, look, I'm somebody who's a lifer, so I also know that no job is for life. I had to learn that one the hard way,
So let's come to the end of this then, right? So let's say, you've given some fantastic overviews of your stories, what's going on in the different elements, the different areas. What's the one piece of advice you would give to people out there, whether they're an artist, or to be fair, this might be different advice, but someone that's maybe trying to build a career in artist services like yourself, but then separately, what's the best piece of advice you would give to someone who's trying to become an artist? Obviously, haven't seen it from the format you have.
I mean, if you want to do the sort of thing that I'm doing, as you've probably gathered from this rambling of a story, there's no clear path to it. I think you've got to do it for the right reasons, because you actually care, you're interested in what you're trying to achieve. And there's lots of different jobs within what I do. I mean, I'm a bit of a jack of all trades, master of none. Although, as I used to call it, I'm like a Swiss Army knife. Not the sharpest tool in the box, but you'll find a use for me eventually.
I love it. Copyright, Alex Branson.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, exactly. I think, look, I've come across people that are supremely talented at running like artist campaigns, and that's all part of artist services. Toby Peacock, I'll call him out. He's a fabulous friend of mine, and I could put him in a meeting with a manager.
Yeah.
And without really having done much in the way of research, he could conjure up a creative campaign for a new album for an artist.
Yeah.
That, to me, is mind-blowing. I love people that can do that sort of thing. I've worked with incredible A&R people that can listen to a record once and call out changes that they would make. Like, we should get this vocalist doing this on this bit here, or we should loop that part of the chorus.
That's
again.
more than experience as well, right? That's a born gift.
The
maybe.
Detail, this was at Empire. I mean, the Delante Murphy, again, who became a great friend of mine, was one of these people. He could listen to a record once and just go, we need to change these things here. And Ghazi's the same, I might add, and it's so impressive. And I think that specialism is something I've never had. I think if you find something that you're really interested in and really good at, double down on it. Become the expert, because that is your value. You're very hard to replace at that point. I think my hard to replace is the fact that I know a bit of everything about everything. And so I'm very useful to music startups or whatever it might be.
Well, it's exactly what you're doing with, sorry to interrupt, but it's exactly what you're doing with Beatport, right? You're bridging that gap. You've got people to do this, people to do that, but there's no conduit between the two. And I think that's, that's certainly where you're showing your worth and you're showing your value, if anything, right?
Yeah, I mean, I can have a conversation with a software engineer as much as I can with a marketing person or a royalties person or a publishing expert or whatever it might be. I sadly, rightly or wrongly, know a bit about everything, and that's definitely kept my career alive in my older years.
That's why you're on the podcast.
I guess so. But I've always been envious of people that do specialize in particular areas. You always see the sort of the job ads for a social media expert or whatever it might be, and I just think I'd never get that gig, and rightly so, right? I'm definitely not what they're looking for. But so I think you just got to be open to everything, and either find your area of specialism or just stay curious.
Fair. Okay. And then so obviously that's someone going into the life of an artist, manager or artist services, etc. It's navigating the landscape. This one, I don't know whether we kind of touched base on this earlier. Apologies if we've kind of gone over it again. A new artist right now looking to find their voice, get into the market, navigate the landscape. What would your advice be to them, having seen it from all angles?
Give yourself time.
Yeah.
Don't be in such a rush to hit imaginary milestones in social media followings or views on
once
on
again, it's the instant gratification, right, that the world is so prone to right now.
Yeah, I have a young daughter, and some level of exposure as to what those platforms do to a young mind, and she knows her own mind. Trust me, she knows her own mind. But I think we've created this sort of slightly weird self-judgment that people now have about what they deem success to be. And I'd go back to my Supervan's borrowed thing about do it for the right reasons, right? Give yourself time. I would encourage anyone to build their career over a long period of time if they're serious about it. If you're not serious about it, you won't. You'll go and do something else with your life.
Once again, it's the passion,
and maybe it just becomes a hobby, and that's okay too.
Of course,
it's all okay. All of it's okay. Music isn't owned by any person, right? It's there for everybody. It's literally storytelling, right? That's where it comes from. So
I love that.
Just do it for the right reasons. Do it for yourself, right? And if you find other people that like it along the way, great. Right, great. And then you can kind of like get interested in all of the kind of different things that you can communicate your message, be it the music or otherwise, out there. It's just. Don't be in a rush. Just give yourself time.
Correct. So something that I've actually decided to kind of try to make a bit of a tradition on the show, and it's the last question that I want to ask all of my guests. What's the legacy that you would love to leave? If there was any sort of kind of defining moment or something that people would go, in 20 years, 30 years, 100 years, that was Alex Branson. What would you want that to be? If you could do anything.
I'm going to make this a really bad segment for you, because there was one of my sorry, I'm going to ruin this for you, but one of my accidental mentors. I remember when I was younger, I was kind of obsessed about being mentioned in articles in Music Week, because I grew up with Music Week being the print magazine and the kind of the voice of the music industry, and I think it probably was for a period of time. And so I saw that as a massive aspiration. I wanted to be in Music Week, and I wanted.
Which you were.
I have been several times. So I did achieve that. I did achieve that goal, and I think that's excellent. But I remember him sort of saying, "But like, no one's going to remember it tomorrow."
Yeah.
I mean, and he's right. If I think back to all of the new innovative platforms that now no longer exist, right? Or the executives that were flavor of the month because they made a big deal about the thing that they did at that moment in time. No one can even remember their names now. Right? I think after that moment, it took me probably a little while, but I realized that actually this isn't about legacy. I don't actually think back to my past too often.
Fair.
Except when I retell the stories, and I think history is important to learn from, and my show was all about education through storytelling, and that was about people's journeys into the industry. But I don't live my life that way. I live my life very much in the present.
Fine,
to a fault.
Right?
Where a little bit more planning probably would have been helpful, right? But I don't, and so I'll probably never change. It's probably too late for me. But therefore, I think legacy isn't something I ever spend any time thinking about.
Okay.
Also, because I don't think I'm particularly brilliant.
May I rephrase the question then?
Sure.
What would be, or what has been, or what would you like to be, maybe a highlight of your own career, or what would you consider as that, yes, I made it, or that was my success moment?
Yeah, it's a similar thing, right?
Yeah,
and
obviously it's more of a personal thing rather than for other people, right? What would make you think? Okay, yes.
So I'm going to sort of turn this back on you, right?
There we go.
Just because I'm kind of like that. I for the first time ever in my career, I started to take a bit of careers advice.
Okay.
But really, it was like kind of coaching.
Yep.
And I've had 2 different coaches for different reasons, and it's only in the last couple of years, really. And the first one asked me a similar question, like what she actually said, what would make you happy, right, in your career?
Okay. I think you're already happy. Am I wrong?
I am.
But
I am now.
Thank you, life coach.
Because she helped me see it, right?
Okay.
Which was, And it started with this kind of like, what is that sort of status thing? What is that amount of money that I could earn? What is that thing that I could have done?
Yeah.
And actually, none of that matters. It really doesn't.
Yeah.
Not when you sort of go to that sort of further place of like what actually makes you happy. Because she was like, but if you could wake up tomorrow and have all the things that you want, you know, like earn, I don't know, £10 million a year or whatever your number is, right? Yeah. You know, that's so extreme and gross, it's hard to imagine. But, you know, or have the title or have the work for the company that you want. Like, but okay, say you get all of that stuff. What would make you happy? And where I got to was she helped me articulate this, which was what I actually really like doing. What makes me happy is I make a contribution.
Love it.
It's when I don't make a contribution that I get anxiety, paranoia. I become fearful for whatever role I'm currently playing. I don't feel fulfilled. I'll go home at the end of the day and go, what on earth did I do today? And it's that lack of feeling like I can make a contribution to everything, right? To the people around me, my nearest and dearest, to the wider industry, to, you know, sort of that sort of arm's length relationship maybe to a music fan, because I've helped a record label or an artist along the way. All of that is the thing that drives me.
Well, in a weird and wonderful way, your last answer was also your beautiful first answer. Obviously the passion, but then the contribution. Obviously you can see how that's just driven your career from what you're doing for independent artists, what you're doing for labels, all the contribution, as you say, to use your own word, you know, what you've been, you know, your work at Warner and Beatport and Ingrooves and everyone else. It looks like it's been obviously not over yet. Not over yet, but
well, I hope not. I've still got a mortgage. Actually, I got two. But, you know, lucky me. It's got to keep going for a while yet. But I'm ever open to things. You know, like the change that's coming at work. I didn't conjure it up. You know, it was something other people did for me, and I presume it's because they think I can help and improve things, and you know, they approach me with it, and I'm like, cool, that sounds good. Let's do that. And I think I've always been a little bit like that. You know,
fair. Yeah. All right, we'll see where Beats Learning goes in a few years. You never know, there might be opportunity for us to collaborate. But
beautiful, love it.
Alex, dude, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much
for
coming. And we'll see you soon, I guess.
Indeed, thank you.
Take care.
All right.
And that wraps up this incredible episode of Beats Learning. A huge thank you to Alex Branson for sharing his wealth of knowledge and insights with us today. From his journey across 2 decades in the music industry to the innovative work he's doing at the Beatport Group, Alex has given us so much to think about, whether it's the evolution of music services or the opportunities for aspiring artists and producers in today's landscape. If you've enjoyed this episode, make sure to hit that subscribe button and leave us a review. It really helps us reach more people who are passionate about music and the industry behind it. You can also follow us on social media at Beats Learning Music for updates, bonus content, and more behind the scenes moments from the podcast. Thanks again for tuning in to Beats Learning. Take care and see you in the next episode.